Hey everybody, Heath Robinson back again, and I'm here with Joel Wolfson. We're excited to present Tackling the Toughest Images with Topaz Studio.
Sounds good. Well, welcome everyone. I appreciate you all taking the time to join me for this webinar. And a special thanks to those of you in faraway time zones who are attending this webinar probably at some ungodly hour. I'm excited to be back doing one of these for Topaz, especially because I've been really impressed with Studio and I wanted to share some of the ways that I use it. When I try new products, I throw everything at it, and sometimes I even break the software. But the great part is the folks at Topaz really do seek my feedback, and they welcome yours as well, so be sure to provide it to them. For those of you that don't know, I provide a number of different educational resources, most of them free. In addition to webinars like this, I also write articles, reviews, blog posts. I do presentations, workshops, all kinds of stuff. So the best way to keep informed about all of this is to subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do on my website. It's joelwolfson.com, and Heath will post all my contact info later on. So if you can't find it right now, you'll get the info later on. So for this webinar, I kind of have two messages. The first is don't be afraid to go out and shoot in inclement weather. And second, if you do, you'll have a lot of great tools in Studio to translate your vision. So I was in Europe all summer this past summer, and I had several shooting jobs. But the images I'm showing you today are really a self-assignment from a trip I took to Ireland for 9 days. Out of those 9 days, I'm not sure if there was a single day where it didn't rain at least once, if not all day. I was on crutches from a knee injury, and I had a stomach bug for the first several days, and it was raining most of the time. But the way I looked at it, the rainy weather meant I'd get some drama in the skies and opportunities for moody shots. The crutches forced me to slow down and be considered about my shooting. And the stomach bug, well, that was disappointing, but hey, I'd lose some weight, and once it went away, I could partake in the local food and beer, which I did. So that's the background on this. So all these shots are going to be from this trip to Ireland. You can see my wet camera there, which just kind of gives you an idea of what the conditions were like. And I'll go through a few images and show you what I did with them. I'll just do a really quick overview of the interface here. I know most of you are probably familiar with Studio, but just so you know what's going on. Over on the left, by the way, Studio is a fairly recent thing, and it's free, which is totally amazing. It's super fast, and it comes with quite a few adjustments built into it, and the ability to use pro adjustments even without paying for them. But if you want all the capabilities, you can buy pro adjustments. Anyway, it's very capable the way it is. It's amazing that it's free, and this is it. You're seeing it right now. So over on the left are the effects. I have it set on my effects, but if you click on this icon, you can go to all kinds of other effects. And these are a combination of effects that are and these effects that I'm talking about are sort of like presets, combinations of adjustments. The new lingo for Studio is adjustments, which are sort of akin to plugins, only it's all working in one platform. So you don't, that's another cool thing. You don't have to hop in and out of Photoshop. You've got all your layers right in the adjustments, and it makes it really fast and efficient. So anyway, there's all kinds of different things you can choose over here, and it's a combination of community effects. Another very cool thing that Topaz has. If you create an effect you like, you can put it out to the community, plus other people share them. So in addition to the ones that come with Studio, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of effects out there that you can use. And they're all accessible under here. So anyway, I'm gonna, and this is just another way to look at it. I'm gonna leave it on my effects. Over on the right are where you'll see the adjustments as I use them. Film strip on the bottom, that's some of the images we're gonna go through today. And then on top are navigation controls, and over on the right is a histogram. So I wanna, the first image I'm gonna start with today is this one. And this is in the Dingle Peninsula in Ireland, and this is the first challenging image I'm going to show. I'm on a moving boat shooting two other boats moving at different speeds in different directions, and at the same time I'm keeping an eye on some seagulls to see if I can time it all for position, basically. Add this to the heavy overcast sky and some of the exposure difficulties, and basically what you're seeing here on the screen is sort of what I had in my mind's eye. Now let me show you where this started. Here's the exposure or the frame from the raw image out of the camera, and you can see overall it's kind of dark, but it was a very moody scene. It was a very dark overcast day. What I did in this case from an exposure point of view is I let the exposure meter decide on the exposure. Now normally in a situation like this where there's a predominant monochromatic, not necessarily monochromatic, but a predominant lightness to it. In other words, the sky and the water are all kind of one tone, and it's relative to the other stuff, it's bright. So normally in a case like this, all else being equal, you would probably want to use some exposure compensation. And the reason I didn't in this case is because there's a lot of texture in the sky. As you saw from the finished image, this is more what it looked like viewing the scene. Because there's a lot of texture in the sky, I didn't want to overexpose it. The cameras I use have a very low noise floor, meaning they can hold a lot of detail in the shadow, and you saw in my final image how much detail there was in these rock formations and cliffs. So this is the reason for me purposely underexposing the image a little bit. So for my first adjustment, what I want to do is just kind of normalize this a bit, and I'm going to use a tone curve. Over on the right here, you see I clicked on adjustments. The ones above the line, these are all the adjustments that come with Topaz Studio. The ones on the bottom are pro adjustments that you can purchase and get a lot more flexibility. And Topaz is keeping in line with their old tradition of giving you lifetime free updates, which is totally amazing. I don't know anyone else that does that. So let's start with, I'm going to start with a tone curve. Before I do that, you may see up here you have basic adjustment, which is the same as this one right here. And this would be a normal starting place, right? Where you have exposure and shadow and highlight and all these controls that are kind of bread and butter controls. But what you'll see is if I start bringing up this exposure to the point where I'm getting that detail back in these rock formations that I ultimately want, I'm kind of burning out the sky and the water, and it's looking kind of washed out, and I don't really want that. So the thing I like about tone curves in some cases, like this one, is that I can adjust different parts of the scene. So it's an actual curve. So in other words, I'm going to start actually by pulling up the middle. So this is kind of, you know, pushing up my midtones. And you notice as I do that, it brings up some of the other tones too. So this is a good way to start with a curve if you're not used to using curves. And another thing I like about this, it allows me to bring in my black point. So I can bring in my black point here. I'm gonna bring it in just a little bit, and then I'm just gonna smooth out my curve up here and bring up the highlights just a little bit. So you can see I can put as many anchor points as I want in here and sort of tweak it. You don't want to tweak it too much. You kind of want a smoothish curve, but I want to get the scene back to sort of where it's going to be in the end, or where I want to go with it. So that's a pretty good starting point. You'll notice I still don't see the detail on the cliffs here, but we will work on that next. And for that, I will use the basic adjustment along with a mask, and I'll show you some of the cool masking tools in here. So I'm going to go over to the right here again, over to adjustments, and this time I am going to pick the basic adjustment. Now, both the basic and the tone curve are part of what you get with it. I apologize for some throat clearing and drinking water here, but I've kind of got some allergies or something going, so I'll try to minimize that, but just to give you a heads up. So on the basic adjustment, now that the rest of the image is closer to the way I'm going to want it to be, Before I go on, actually, before I create a mask, I wanted to crop this. And normally this is, I would crop in the very beginning. In fact, if you look at the lower left, these are sort of the set of tools that you generally would do to the image before anything else. And one of the reasons I do like to try to do most of the cropping beforehand is that, especially when you have this big expanse of white, that is going to influence how you make adjustments, because you're seeing a whole bunch of white. And whether you're fully aware of it or not, that's just the way our brains work. We see the tonality relative to the things around it, same with colors and that sort of thing. So assuming I'm happy with my crop here, I can just go over here and say done. And of course, this has all the usual controls to change the angle of it. You have fixed crop ratios. If you want to use those, you can enter custom ones. So it's versatile cropping tool. All right, so the other reason you want to crop ahead of time is if you're going to do masks to keep everything lined up. And so now I'll go into my basic adjustment. I'm going to move this up, and until I start seeing detail in those cliffs. And I'm going to overdo it a little bit. It's better to overdo it a little bit, in my opinion. In Studio, you have an opacity adjustment for every single adjustment, every single layer. They essentially come in as layers, which means you can rearrange them as well, rearrange the order of them. So you can see I can always use this opacity adjustment to bring that down if I want. So it's okay if I'm a little bit over on it. And that's really the only adjustment I want to do other than building a mask. For the masks, you go up to the top, you hit this plus icon, and this brings up the mask and the masking tools. The masking in this program is very powerful. There are a lot of good masking tools. And they also sort of make them contextual with the adjustment that you're using. But anyway, over on the left, I have brush. I can do a spot. I can do a gradation. I can use a color value to make a mask, luminance value, and then there's more adjustments beyond that. And I'll get into some of those later. But for this, probably the easiest way to mask out these cliffs for that adjustment is to use the brush tool. Now, I'm going to invert it. So if I go up in the mask, you see you have this little eyeball that turns the mask on and off. And then I'm just going to invert it here. You can reset it. That's what that little arrow is. So I'll grab the brush tool, and 0 means black. If you remember with masking, white reveals, black conceals. So now I want to reveal back what's in those cliffs. So I'm going to put it all the way over to 100% here. And I'm going to adjust the size of my brush here. Oh, maybe something like that. And the outer circle is the feathered edge, the softness. So what I'll do is just start going along here. Now you'll notice I just want to point out one more thing. Down here I have the edge aware turned on. In this case, I do want to see the edges, so I'm using the edge aware. And let me just zoom in a little bit here so we can see it a little bit better. And so I'm just going to kind of go along here. And you notice I'm not being super careful on the edge, and it's seeing the edges as I go along here. And if I happen to miss a little bit or mess it up a little bit, I can always go back and fix it. I'm bound to do that, so I'll just show you if I do that how we fix it. And anyway, the way I do it is I like to kind of do an outline first, and then I'll fill in. You see I missed a little spot over here. I'm going to bring down the size a little bit because this is a little bit tighter over here. And I'll just go along these edges, make sure I got this okay. And now I'm going to bring up my brush a little bit in size, and I can just go in and fill this in. And you can see that we're getting quite a bit of detail in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my navigation thing here and just move over a little bit. And I'll do the same thing over here. So I'll get these rocks. I'd like to start with the edge first. All right, and then I'll just brush all this into. And you can see I have a small version of the mask itself over on the side here, so I can see, you know, here and there I missed a couple little spots. I can just go fill those in. And, you know, of course, you can look at it visually too and see. Now you can see I missed like a couple little spots here. So what I can do is go back over to the mask transparency, bring it back down to 0, which is black. I'll even go up to 100% here. And I guess I'll bring my brush down just a little bit. And so now I'm painting with black. I'll just go to those edges. And you notice it just kind of shrink wraps. So that's part of that edge aware thing. And it's just shrinking right to the edge. And if you look how clean these edges are, that's part of that whole edge aware brush. And you know, you can, if especially, you know, like look over here, it's pretty cool. If you see where the cursor is over on the right, you can see every little one of those plants like blades of grass or whatever they are sticking up, and there really aren't any halos to speak of. And if you have any, you can just go back in and retouch those edges. And as long as you have the, you know, the edge aware on, it just kind of shrink wraps to those edges. So not a lot of time involved here. I've got, oops, I missed I missed some on that master because I was over on the edge of the photo. But I need to go back to the full masking, and I will bring up my brush size a bit and just finish filling this in here. Okay, so there we are. Oops, I went a little over there, so we can always go back and touch this up. And we get our little, I call it shrink wrapping that we get going there. So now we have a nice mask. Personally, I think, and when I click on this, it's going to close back up the adjustment thing. I've got my handy dandy opacity slider here, and it's probably, I think it's just a hair overdone, so I'll bring it down. You know, I want it to be balanced with the rest of the image, and this is kind of a darker, moody image, and this is more, you know, how I saw it. So we've got actually probably the lion's share of this thing done. I'm going to add some texture to the clouds, and I probably want to do my my sharpening too. Now, it used to be I always recommended doing capture sharpening in the very beginning, but everything's interrelated, especially now when you have things like precision contrast, clarity sliders, all those sorts of things. Those all add to the apparent sharpness of an image. So in a sense, you can do your sharpening, your capture sharpening first, or you can do it later on in the process. But because I'm going to add some texture to the clouds too, I'll show you kind of a cool way that you can use precision detail. So precision detail is very aptly named. That's what it does. Now, if you're familiar with the older detail plugin, this is an adjustment version for Studio of that. By the way, one thing just real quick, if you don't already know this, you notice up in the menu here in the upper left, there is a plugins menu, and here you can see all of the Topaz plugins. So they integrate fine with detail. I'm sorry, with Studio, and you can use any of these right along with Studio. So if you don't have your favorite old plugin as an adjustment in Studio, or they're just something you prefer using it this way, and you already own these, those are all accessible through Studio. And Topaz is just going at a breakneck pace with adding new adjustments all the time, and every time they do, it's an improvement over the previous one, which is really nice. And the speed is amazing on this stuff. It pretty much all works in real time, it seems, no matter what you're doing. Even on my sort of older aging laptop, it's still quite fast, and on my desktop machine, it's pretty much real time all the time. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, detail is divided into small, medium, and large detail, and then within each of those, there's a detail boost. So small detail is just like it sounds. It's very fine detail, and the detail boost is even boosts the even smaller details. So it's sort of a finer revision of small detail. Same with the other detail boosts. And what that does is, so you can get down to the essentially the pixels in the pixel level in the image with the small detail boost. And small detail is generally what you want to do for your capture sharpening. So let's just go to 100% here and take a look at some of the detail on the boat. So what I would do is my cameras, not all of them are this way. In fact, most are not, but a lot of cameras these days don't have anti-aliasing filters, so they don't require quite as much capture sharpening. So I usually put this up around the 20 or 25 range, somewhere in there. And the detail boost, I generally will not increase this, especially for capture sharpening, because really all it's going to do here, I'll bring it up all the way so you can see, is it's the finest detail is essentially the noise in the image, and so we don't really want to boost that. What we want to boost is the actual fine detail, you know, like if you're looking at this boat, the fishing lines and the antenna and things like that. So typically what I'll do is I'll bring this in that 20 to 25 range, and you can see if I bring that all the way down to 0, there's the before. It's pretty subtle, and I hope you can see this over your internet connection. And then I bring that up, and it just kind of refines those details. And sometimes what I'll do, you know, if the noise bothers you, I have a preset where I bring the detail boost down a little bit. You don't really lose anything in the fine sharpness, but you can eliminate some of this noise. And realistically, when you see noise at 100% pixel peeping, you're not going to see it in a print. The way I figure is, what I've learned from experience anyway, is that if you look at it at about 50%, so let me drop this down. When you're around 50%, that's the equivalent of scrutinizing a pretty large print, like at least a 3-foot print. And I make prints, you know, all the way up to 8 feet sometimes. So I don't worry too much about a little bit of noise. But if you want, you can use this little minus thing in the detail boost. I also have a preset for that. You notice they have presets in here, and the ones on the bottom I've saved off. So, you know, something like this, no AA means no anti-aliasing filter, high ISO. And even though this isn't a high ISO, you know, that puts in the minus thing in there. So there really isn't a lot to this. Now, in terms of the capture sharpening, but what I want to show you, it's pretty cool, is now I could do a separate layer for this, but what I'm going to do is show you that you can do this even just within the same detail layer. With precision detail here, is because the clouds are much larger details, they're much larger things, I can use the large detail boost, and you can isolate it to shadows and highlights too. So I'm going to go to the highlights, and I'm gonna go up to the large detail here, and I'll even throw a little boost on there, and you can see the texture coming back in the clouds, and it really isn't affecting much else. You know, it's affecting the water a little bit, but that's fine. I don't mind bringing out a little texture there too. So, you know, if you want, like I say, you can just do a separate adjustment layer and isolate this, but I'm able to kind of do it in the same one here. So I think we're pretty good on, I did kind of a combo there just to show you the different capabilities of how you can isolate shadows and the size of detail. So I did it all in one layer. Now I'm just going to do a couple final steps on this image. So one thing I want to do is get maybe a little more drama, a little more punch to it. So I'm going to add an HSL color tuning adjustment. I'm changing my mind here as I look at this. It's actually kind of punchy as it is, but as long as I have this HSL tuning layer, I think what I'm going to do is just change the saturation in the boat. I want to show you how this thing works, and this is kind of a good opportunity. HSL is hue, saturation, and lightness, and what it does is it allows you to adjust those parameters for any color separately in the image. And as you hover over these colored squares, you can see it's putting these red hash marks to show you where those colors exist in the image. So The boat obviously is red. Let me enlarge that, and I'll move over to the boat. So to me, the boat's looking a little bit too electric. And so I'm going to isolate the red tones here, and I'm going to bring down, I'm going to do two things. The boat was a little more orangish. And so if I move this over, it goes to a more orangey color. I'm not going to go too extreme, but just a little bit in the hue here, get a little more orangey, and I'm going to take a little bit of the saturation off. You see, if I go all the way down, I lose all the color in it. But I'm just going to back off on the saturation of the boat. Now, this is just a little tweak, but I want to show you, it's one that I would do in this image, but I just want to show you what the capability of this particular adjustment is. It's pretty cool. Now, my final step is I want to add a little more three-dimensionality to this. What I call adding depth to the image. I guess what most people call adding depth to the image, but just want to get a sense of a little more sense of depth in 3 dimensions. So for that, I'm going to use the precision contrast, which is set up is similar to precision detail, but it's dealing with contrast. So we have 4 levels here, from micro contrast, meaning where there's very, very little difference from one area to another, to low, to medium, to high. And in addition to that, after you get the settings you want here, you can go in and separately adjust the lighting, and there's color adjustments as well. So there's a lot of adjustments on this. I could probably spend a half an hour just showing you this, but I won't. So I'm going to use one of, I think I'll use a preset here that just says add depth landscape. And what happens there, what happens with that preset, and this is pretty typical, is you want to boost detail in the mid-tones to get more of a sense of depth. So you can see I got a tiny bit in the micro, but it's mostly in the low and the medium. And in this particular case, I have the highlight slider down. That just brings down the highlights a little bit. It doesn't make much of a difference in this image. It's just part of my preset. But let me show you. I'm going to close this, and then I'll turn it off and on. So if I turn it off, that's before, and the image looks good, but when I turn it on, you can see, especially in the water, and going back into these hills, you really get a sense of 3 dimension, more so than without it. I'll do that again. So there's no precision contrast, and this is a little bit subtle, but it really does work. And there's, with the mid-tone contrast, adding a sense of depth. So there we are. We went from, here, I'll do a before and after. We'll try again. So there's our before and after, and you can see, look at the detail we got in the clouds. I mean, it's a pretty dramatic change going from one to the other. So let's go on to the next image. So for this next image, let's see, I'm going to, let me go back to the regular view here. This right here is another landscape I shot in Ireland, and I really love the drama of the warm spotlighting from the sun on the shore and on the water against that really dark sky. So the image I started with is right here. That's the raw image. This is from the raw image out of the camera. And as I always say, raw is blah, and we need to do something with it. So I think the first thing we'll do, I'm going to blow this up so you can see there's actually a lot of detail in this image. You can see all these sheep. You can make out the structure of the windows in this house. So there's a lot of fine detail. So I definitely want to bring that out a little more with my capture sharpening. And so remember, we use the precision detail for that. And in this case, I will just go to one of my presets. And I don't know if you noticed this before, but as I hover over them, you can see the effect, and it just happens instantly. And you even see the sliders move as I move this around. So I'm going to use my landscape one here, and there's before where we thought it looked pretty detailed, but you can see how much more detail there really is when I use some capture sharpening with it. Next thing I want to do is a tone curve. And let me zoom out again so you can see what I'm doing here. Again, I'll you know, I'm looking for drama, so I want a little contrast. I'll bring in my black point just a little bit. We need to push up the overall exposure a bit. So we'll do that. That's getting closer to how it looked. Maybe we want some contrast here, so I'm gonna bring down that the quarter tones here, the darker tones just a bit. And I'm gonna leave that, it's pretty smooth up here where the highlights are. I'm gonna leave that there because we're gonna be doing other adjustments. We don't necessarily need to get it exactly to a final stage trying to do it with just the tone curve. We have a lot of other tools at our disposal. I do wanna punch up the color a little bit and contrast on this. The way I used to do that in the film days is with a film called Velvia, for those of you that are familiar with films. Those of you that shoot Fuji cameras have presets to simulate film. So that's essentially what I've done with one of my adjustments. So it's our friend, the HSL tuning that we used to isolate the red boat before. But in this case, we're going to be affecting a lot of different colors. So, and here's that whole thing. And you see, as I hover over these, you can see the effect immediately. This thing just processes so fast. So there's my Velvia setting, essentially. And what you can see is, if you look where these squares that I showed you before, these colored squares, the blue bar underneath it means that adjustments are made. So if you have a preset or you're using someone else's and you see those bars, you know that's where the adjustments are. So in the overall, there's just a little bump in saturation. And then in each of these, I've made some mostly saturation adjustments to just give it that little extra Velvia punch. So if you want to see the before, so I'm clicking the eyeball in the layer here to turn off just that layer, so I'm seeing just the effect of hue, saturation, color tuning. And when I turn it back on, that's the effect. And it's a lot, like I say, I created this to be kind of a simulation of Velvia film. And in fact, if you want to try it yourselves, I'll show you another, if you don't know this already about Studio. And it's true in some of their previous plugins too. All right, so here's the one I use, the Velvia landscape one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the edit, and I will put this out in the community. Oh, I guess I already have it there. So all I do is say yes, and now it's in the community. So if any of you have Studio open, you can go find this preset now and try it out. You do want to use it on an image that's, you know, usually already adjusted to see the full effect. So there I've got my Velvia thing. Now what I want to do is bring back some of that texture in the clouds. And so I think what I'm going to use for that is detail. So I'll go back to precision detail, and I actually have a cloud preset. So let me go over to my pull down menu. I think I have a cloud preset. Yes, I do. So I have this one called cloud texture. Now, I'm gonna have to show you some more masking techniques in here, because when I do cloud texture, the clouds look great and the rest of it looks terrible. So that's really easy to fix with a mask, and I'm excited here because I get to show you one of my favorite masking techniques. I'm gonna click on the plus here to bring up my mask, right? And what I'm going to do is use the gradual in this thing, the gradation curve, along with, when I click on that, you'll see some more tools come up. And along with that gradation, you can see there's an edge aware slider here. If I move it all the way to the left, it doesn't see edges, and you can see over here on the right, the mask gives you a typical gradation. If I leave it in the middle, which is edge aware, you can make it more edge aware going to the right. But look at how clean this mask is cut. So it's essentially combining gradation with a mask edge. This could take you a long time to do this in any other masking program, and it's like instantaneous here. Now I want to reverse this because I have the wrong part of the image selected, but that's easy enough. I just go up here and, whoops, I'm sorry, I'm on the layer one. I want to go in the masking menu, and I go to invert. I should point that out. There's a separate eyeball, so you can turn the mask on and off, and a separate menu in the masking area from the actual adjustment up here. So there we are. It instantly cut this mask, and I can even refine it a little more. This is really cool and very powerful. So I can, if you notice, I hope you can see this, over on the right here where my mask is, you can see there's a little bit of gray. Now remember, white reveals, black conceals, but the gray is in between. So that means I'm not getting full masking on those clouds. If I want to clean that up, I click on this adjust, I get all these extra tools for the mask. I can actually make the mask expand it or contract it. I can adjust the density of the mask. I can make it more dense, I can make it less dense, and everywhere in between. Okay, so one affects the black side, one affects the white side. I'm gonna leave it right where it is, but what I'm gonna do is watch. When I increase the contrast, I completely eliminated that gray in there. It made the black blacker and the white whiter. And let's magnify that and take a look at those nice clean lines that I got between the clouds and the sky. I don't have any of that funkiness that was in there when I didn't have the mask. So if I turn the mask off, you can see how funky that is. And here it gave you this nice edge. So that's for landscapes, that's just wonderful. Or architecture where you have some clean lines. You don't have to go in and brush it or anything. You can just use that, use the gradual along with the feathering, sorry, not the feathering, but the edge aware. So pretty cool. And let me go to an overall here. So we're pretty much done. There's just a couple little tweaks. I kind of want to make the water and the sunlit shore brighter because that's kind of the way it looked to me. And I'll just go in and grab the basic adjustment here, and we'll just do a really quick adjustment. So I'm going to bring that up because the shoreline and the water were definitely much more brightly lit from the sun, and that's a little bit more how they look. Now you see I'm losing my contrast and drama up on top, but as you know, that's not a big deal. We can use a mask, and I'll just use the gradual mask again, only this time. And you can adjust this mask too. So I can, I can move it up, and in the middle I can, normally anyway, I keep unclicking it. You should be able to move that mask around. So what I'm going to do is turn off the edge aware completely and make it a little more of a gradual mask. So I'm going to gradate it a little bit more that way, and that's pretty good. So we're maintaining. I'll bring it down. Actually, I'm going to bring it down a little more if I can, because I want it a little bit darker on top. So there we are. I'll close the mask, and so I've lit up that other part. And there's one little thing I think is missing, and that's the warmness from the sun, where that very nice warm light coming through the clouds, at least it's warm in contrast to the rest of that blue water and the dark sky and everything. And I'm going to use an adjustment you might not think about for getting a little bit of sort of sweet light look to it. And I'm going to use the dual tone, which you normally think of dual toning for, or toning in period for doing things like sepia tone and cyanotypes and things like that. But I have a default a preset in here that I call Sweet Light. Now, again, as I go through these, you can see all different ones, but I have this one called Sweet Light. Now, you'll notice what it does is it's only sort of working on the reflections on the water. You still see the water is blue, and you still see these colors the way they are, but there's just that little extra golden sheen. And what I'll do is I'll turn it off so you can see that's before, and that's after. Now, you notice in my preset, I have the opacity way down, so I can crank that up, but that's just too much. I'm just looking for a subtle touch. I just did that in the preset because some images require a little more. In fact, maybe I'll bring it up just a hair, because all I really want is sort of that sheen. So the reason this is working the way it is, let me show you this dual tone thing. this adjustment, you set the tones differently for shadow and highlight. And what I've done here, the reason it's working so well, and this does work really well on water, this technique, is to just use the highlight color. So I've set, this is where you set the color itself, and you can move it around and get different colors. But I found for sunlight, 13 is just about perfect for like a sweet light look. And then I crank up that highlight color pretty high. I'm up in about 70% range here. But remember, I've got the overall opacity down. So if I, I can move that around at will. So this is not necessarily the kind of use you'd think of for dual tone, but I think it works great for this, especially if you want just kind of a subtle sunlit effect on there. Of course, you can make it less subtle by adjusting that opacity slider up. All right, let me show you. I think we're done here. It looks great. It's really what I envisioned when I looked at it, and more what I saw in this dramatic scene. I'm gonna there. Okay, so there's our before and after. Obviously, the top one is the raw file. Actually, it's a TIFF from the raw file, but with no adjustments, basically. And then the bottom with all of our studio adjustments. So I'm going to try to squeeze in one more image here and still leave some time for questions. My next image, let me go back to the normal view, is, let's see, right here. Well, here. All right, so this image right here, also in Ireland, obviously, and this was pretty challenging lighting. This is a music store by day and sort of a pub and music venue by night. And because I was shooting wide open and sometimes manually, I limited myself to only one drink. There is a wide range of lighting in this place. So there's candles, there's an overhead light that's actually red. There's sunlight coming through the window, which is providing a fair amount of light. But you can see there's all like kinds of pockets. The accordionist who's singing, his face is pretty well lit. The guitarist, he's kind of in shadow. Anyway, there's a lot going on here, both with lighting and just visually. It's a really sort of eclectic place. It's really cool. And we have this whole nautical theme going, but it's a little bit busy. And where I want to go with this, I'll show you, is a black and white. And you can see in the black and white, I've given the focus much more to the performers and a couple audience members that are clearly enjoying themselves and looking at this or looking and listening and enjoying the music and the entertainment from these guys. And although you can see the rest of the stuff, I've minimized it with a vignette and some other things. So I'll show you how I got there from here. The first thing that I want to do here is, well, you know what? I think what I'll do, I would say a tone curve, but the very first thing you want to do in an image like this is if you can see it's a little bit noisy. And so you probably want to do your noise elimination first. That's usually a first step before you do anything else. So I am going to go to reduce noise. And I might, let's see if I'm going to see if I have, we'll see if this one works. Basically here, I'm just going to go through it mainly. Basically what we have in here is mostly color noise. Now, because I know this is going to be a black and white, I may not have to reduce the color noise quite as much as usual, but by reducing it a little bit, and then I'm going to go bring down the overall noise a little bit too. That's a little bit too much. That's pretty good. If just like any other time with noise reduction, the more you reduce noise, the more you sacrifice your sharpness too. And I don't want to lose the sharpness. So I still, I can still see the stubble on this guy's chin. So I've still got plenty of detail. That amount of noise is not going to be bothersome. And by the time we're done, you won't see it, especially if you do a print. So there's our noise reduction. Then I'm going to go in and do a tone curve here, pretty similar to what I've done in the other ones. Let me do an overall view. I'll bring this in a little bit for the black point. I don't need to bring it in too much because there's quite a bit of contrast in here. I just want to, you'll see when I bring up the values here that it also if I don't bring in that black point, my shadows or my dark areas are a little tiny bit muddy. So I'm just going to bring in that black point just a tiny bit, and maybe just smooth out the curve a little. So that's pretty good. Great starting point. And let's see, we can, well, let's take a look. We did some noise reduction, so maybe we want to try just, we could try a little bit of sharpening with this. Let me go in with precision detail, and I'll use my default, or sorry, my preset for the high ISO one. That might even be a little much. So that one's pretty good. I think what I'll do here is, oh, it's already in my preset. So what you see what I did here is with detail, you can control shadows and highlights separately, which is really cool. And in case I didn't point it out before, here I have the small shadow detail decrease. So you can see if I bring that down, it's just bringing down the detail in the shadow areas. Likewise, if I bring it up, it's going to bring up, goes kind of crazy there, but just a little bit in the minus here. And I think we're good. And what I'm going to do now is add my black and white to this. So I'm going to go here, go to my black and white. And that's not bad. Those of you that are familiar with the old Topaz black and white effects, this is a different implementation. A lot of the controls that were in black and white effects can be done with other adjustments. This is kind of similar to Lightroom's black and white, only Lightroom doesn't have the amazing masking. So I like this better. And what this is all about is we are dealing with a color image. So you can go in and adjust all these sliders and change the tonality in your black and white based on what's in the color. So this guy was wearing a blue shirt. Let me just, here, I'll hold down. When you hold down the space bar, that gives you the before. So there's the before. You can see he has kind of a bluish shirt. There's a lot of blue in this image. I'm not going to adjust. I'm just going to use that as an example to show you. You can also see there's a lot of warm tones in here. And other than this guy's face, a lot of them, like his face and their faces and some of this stuff in here, might use some adjustment. So it's probably going to be in the orange or the yellow. And the way you can find out is just, move the orange slider. You can see that makes a pretty big difference. So I'm going to bump the orange up just to, it's essentially bringing up all those areas that are lit from the tungsten light. So I'm just going to bring that up just a hair. And you can see if I take one of these other sliders, like here's the blue one, the blue jeans and the blue shirt get brighter or darker. So you can control all those things separately. It's actually pretty cool, pretty powerful. So I think that looks pretty good overall. The only thing I would say is his face is a little dark. His face is a little dark. Her face isn't bad, but we could bring it up a little. So I'll make use of some of that masking. I'm going to add, let's just do another tone curve. And so faces, we're kind of looking at mid-tones. So I'm going to bring that up. I'm ignoring the rest of the image here, okay? And I'm going to bring it up even a little brighter than I need to. And then what I'm going to do is go up into the masking and we'll invert that. And then we're just going to paint it back in. So kind of like we painted in those cliffs, only in this case, I don't really need edge aware. It probably doesn't even matter either way. And I'll get a brush. And let me pick a good size here. And I'll put a little softening on the edges there, and I'll go up to 100%. So, oh, and by the way, I want to set my masking. I'll start that at 100%. I'm going to bring my brush down just a little more. You notice the brush increases in size. That's because I have a cursor magnifier on this, just so you guys can follow me better. It doesn't normally do that, so that's not a bug. That's me having set my cursor size bigger. So there we brought up his face quite a bit. I'm somehow missing a spot in there. Let's see, there we go. So the other thing I'm going to do on this tone curve, since I'm losing contrast in his face, is I'm going to bring in the black point a little bit to increase the contrast. There we go. So that looks better. Now I am going, and that might be a little too bright, but we can adjust that later with our opacity. This guy's face is pretty dark too. We want to see him because he and his partner there are clearly enjoying the music. So that's part of the deal here. Now, in this case, you see her face is better lit. We have this, crazy lighting going on here. So for her, I'm going to bring the mask transparency down so it's more of a gray, and because I don't really want to increase hers quite as much as the rest of them. And you can see that brings her up just a little bit, and she's a little more even with the guy sitting next to her. All right, so let me bring this back down. And so here we are. And if this is too much, I'm going to close the mask now. You can see we just have the faces masked. I can always go into this opacity slider and adjust this to my heart's content. So if I bring it all the way down, we're back to the sort of dark faces again. I'm going to bring it almost all the way up. I don't want to overpower this guy. Now, the only thing left to kind of isolate these guys is just a vignette. And Studio has a great vignette tool in it. So I am going to go to, oops, that's up here in the included vignette. Now, the way I like to do this is I like to bring the strength all the way up just so I can see exactly where this vignette is. And you see with these controls, you can adjust the size, you can make it very small, you can make it very big. I'm going to keep it sort of right where it is. You can adjust the transition, how sharp those edges are on the transition of your vignette. I'm going to actually pretty much leave that where it is too. You can adjust whether it's round or square. Now, the only other thing, first of all, I'll want to bring this back down. It's too strong, but this is a way I can adjust it. Another really cool thing here is you can set the vignette where the vignette center is. So I can move this dot around, and that'll move the vignette around on the image. And so I can move it up or down. And so I'm going to just mostly move it to the left a little bit. And then I'm going to back off on the strength quite a bit here. I think I'll bring it down even a little more. Maybe sort of in that 60K. So there we are. We still, it's a gradual vignette. You probably don't notice it right off the bat when you're looking at the photo. You still able to see that nautical theme in the back. And there we are, voila. So let's do a before and after on this one too. I'll bring it down a little bit in size. And here. There we go. You know what? I'll just make it a little bigger so you can see better. And I know we've only got a few minutes left, but for questions. So there you are, before and after. A lot of powerful tools in this thing. I just love how fast it is, and the flexibility. The masking is amazing. You can do it in every layer. I mentioned before you can move these layers around. If you want to get a different effect, move these layers around, because the order will sometimes make a difference depending what you're doing. And there we are.
Thanks very much, Joel. If you'd like to follow Joel, you can always follow Joel at his website, joelwolfson.com, or his blog, joelwolfson.com/blog, or you can email him at info@joelwolfson.com. If you've got content, cool stuff, images, and things you've created, we have a blog submission program. The address for that is right here. It's just our studio website /blog submission program. We're looking for blog posts, cool images that you've made. If you want to share your steps and how you're using Studio or any of our programs to make cool stuff, we'd love to hear about it. If you have any questions, you can always contact me at webinars@topazlabs.com, or sign up for upcoming webinars at topazlabs.com/webinars. Trying to get the rest of the year filled out, but I know we have one coming up soon with Joe Reardon, and we've got one for Rad next week that's going to be on the schedule. So, Joel, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for really showing your workflow. You really got into some deep stuff with Studio, some things I haven't even tried. So I really appreciate
Oh,
that. I know we've got a lot of great feedback, and I look forward to seeing you in the future.
great. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day or your evening, as the case may be. And I think I'm back in November or sometime in the next couple months. So look forward to seeing you or talking to you all again, doing another webinar. And thanks a lot, Heath, and Topaz too. Thanks.